Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty out there, mirror bacteria.
Sounds a little ominous.
It is essentially picture a bacteria, but every molecule's flipped, like a mirror image.
I see.
We've got a technical report by some scientists who are looking into if this could even exist and the risks if it did.
Because if life with the opposite-handedness just popped up, who knows what happens?
Exactly. So to kick things off, maybe you could explain this whole chirality thing for our listeners.
Right, so think about your hands. They're mirror images of each other, chemically the same, but you can't wear a left glove on your right hand, right?
True.
Molecules are like that too. And all life we know uses mostly left-handed ones.
So mirror bacteria, they'd be the right-handed version. And would they even work with our biology?
That is the question. This report, it suggests they wouldn't fit with natural molecules.
Okay.
So immune system can't see them, the antibiotics wouldn't work, it's using the wrong key in a lock.
That's already kind of creepy. How do we even make these things? Is this sci-fi or is it actually possible?
The report lays out two paths, both wild. Building them from scratch, which is super complex, or modifying bacteria we already have.
From scratch, like building a cell from nothing. That sounds like a movie.
Right, but research on artificial cells is happening. Synthesize mirror proteins, DNA, cell membranes. It's a huge challenge.
All right, so that's bottom up. What about changing bacteria that already exist?
That involves things like expanding the genetic code. You'd stick mirror image amino acids, the protein building blocks, into normal bacteria.
But how would you even get the bacteria to use those mirror image parts?
Researchers are looking at crossover ribosomes. Ribosomes, think of them like the cell's factories for making proteins. We'd have to engineer them to build mirror proteins using those mirror image amino acids.
Clever, but I bet there are problems with that too.
Definitely. A big one is mirror image components could be toxic to a normal cell.
Right, like it's trying to read a language it doesn't understand.
Yeah, it could really mess things up. And another challenge is engineering orthogonal systems, basically separate systems inside the bacteria.
So the mirror stuff doesn't mess with the normal stuff.
Exactly. And one cool idea is to use artificial organelles for this, little compartments inside the bacteria to hold the mirror stuff.
That makes sense. Okay, so let's talk risks. We touched on the immune system, but what other dangers are there?
The report says two big ones: human health and ecological impact. Let's start with health. If our immune systems can't even see these bacteria,
Then we're just wide open to infections.
it's worse than that. The report goes into how it could break down our immune response at every level. Innate immunity, that first line of defense, adaptive immunity with antibodies and T cells, all compromised.
Like our immune system has a blind spot and mirror bacteria explode it.
Yeah, and it gets weirder. The report says they could even cause a sepsis-like response, inflammation going haywire, without even having toxins.
So even if they're not dangerous themselves, our body freaks out in a bad way. That's counterintuitive. Can you give an example of how that might happen?
They use mirror E. coli as an example. Imagine our immune cells, they're supposed to eat and destroy bacteria, but they can't even grab onto these mirror E. coli because the shapes are wrong. Or picture mirror peptides, little protein bits, not binding to the molecules that help our immune system recognize threats.
Okay, yeah, immune evasion is officially terrifying. But what about the environment? What could these bacteria do out there?
Biggest concern is they could be resistant to all the things that normally keep bacteria in check. Predation, naturally occurring antibiotics. Imagine it just spreading because nothing can control it.
It'd be like an invasive species on steroids.
Right, and they give us specific examples like a mirror prochlorococcus, which are tiny bacteria in the ocean, impacting the whole ecosystem.
They're super important for oxygen, right? So if a mirror version took over.
Huge disruption. And since they're so different, no guarantees nature could contain them.
Okay, I'm getting nervous now. But surely there are ways to contain these things, right? Scientists wouldn't just make them and let them loose.
Containment is huge in the report, but it's tricky. These guys don't play by the rules of normal life. Standard biosafety stuff might not cut it.
So if even in a lab, it might not be enough to stop them from escaping. What about biological containment, like engineering them so they can't survive outside?
Right, one method is auxotrophy. You make the bacteria need a specific nutrient that's not out in the wild. Escape, they starve.
Makes sense. But I'm guessing there's a catch.
Of course, bacteria, they swap genes all the time. Horizontal gene transfer, it's called. They could pick up the genes they need to survive in the wild from other bacteria.
So even if we engineer them to be dependent, they could evolve their way out of it. That's unnerving.
Yeah, it's a worry. They also talk about kill switches, genetic mechanisms we could trigger to destroy them if needed.
That sounds promising, but I feel like there's a but coming.
There is. The problem is, how do you make sure a kill switch stays effective against something that's evolving super fast?
They could mutate and become resistant to the very thing meant to kill them. This is like a sci-fi horror movie now.
It does raise questions about whether we should even be doing this research.
Okay, but let's say, worst case, a mirror bacteria gets out. What do we do? What about antibiotics? Wouldn't those work?
That's where it gets complicated. Most antibiotics target specific viral molecules, the left-handed ones in normal bacteria. Mirror bacteria wouldn't be affected.
Right, wrong key, wrong lock.
Exactly. There are a few possibilities, though. Chiral antibiotics, they don't have a specific handedness. Those might work.
So there's a tiny bit of hope there. What about vaccines? Could we develop those for protection?
Existing vaccines, nope, they target normal bacteria. Making new ones would be incredibly hard.
It's like even if we made a vaccine from mirror bacteria, our immune system, trained to recognize those mirror images, wouldn't recognize the actual mirror bacteria when we encounter them.
You got it. Really tough challenge. Maybe conjugate vaccines, those target parts of bacteria that aren't chiral. Those might have a shot, but it's a long shot.
So, not really a solution then. Anything else we could try?
The report mentions phage therapy. That's using viruses that infect and kill bacteria.
I've heard of that. It's like eating their natural enemy, but how would that work with mirror bacteria?
You'd need mirror phages, viruses made of mirror image molecules, to target them.
A mirror image virus to fight a mirror image bacteria? That sounds ridiculously complicated.
Oh, it would be a huge undertaking. But if it worked, phage therapy has upsides. They're super specific, only kill the target bacteria, and they can co-evolve with bacteria, adapt to their defenses as they change.
That's important, especially if these mirror bacteria could evolve resistance to everything else so quickly.
Definitely. But making mirror phages would be incredibly difficult, and then there's all the regulations to deal with. Phage therapy is still experimental.
Okay, so it's an option, but not a quick fix. This is sounding more and more like we're in trouble. It's amazing, this mirror bacteria stuff, but the risks are really serious, and maybe we're not ready to deal with them.
It's that classic double-edged sword of science. We have to be really careful, weighing the good against the bad here, and make smart choices about how to move forward.
Well, we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive into the world of mirror bacteria. We've looked at how to make them, how dangerous they could be, and how hard it would be to contain them.
We've gone through the immune system problems, the ecological impact, and how they could spread everywhere.
But this is just the start. In the next part, we'll go even deeper into the consequences, looking at how mirror bacteria could affect the whole web of life on Earth.
We'll look at their potential interactions with animals, vertebrates, and invertebrates, and dive into the fascinating world of plant defenses.
So stay tuned for part 2, where we continue exploring this mind-blowing scientific frontier. Welcome back to our deep dive into mirror bacteria. Last time we left off with those potential risks and how tough it'd be to contain these things. Now I want to get into how mirror bacteria could actually mess with all the life on Earth.
Right, we talked about our own immune systems, but what about other animals? Would they be just as vulnerable?
I mean, animals have so many different immune defenses, from complex ones in mammals to simpler ones in insects. You'd think some would handle mirror bacteria better, right?
You'd hope so, but the report, it's saying those basic problems we talked about, they apply across the board. Mirror bacteria could mess up both innate and adaptive immunity.
So it's not just us, it's potentially the whole animal kingdom.
That's the scary part. And they even give examples like, what if mirror bacteria infected livestock, like cows or pigs?
Oh, man.
Huge impact on food production, the whole agricultural industry.
Not just individual animals being sick, but like a whole system crashing. What about wild animals then? Would they be in the same boat?
The report's worried about them too, especially endangered species. They're already vulnerable, right? Throw in a new pathogen.
Imagine a mirror bacteria wiping out some endangered primate or bird that's already on the edge.
It'd be awful. Really shows how connected everything is. One species goes down, it ripples out to so many others.
Okay, so vertebrates are at risk. What about bugs, invertebrates? Similar immune systems, right? Would they be less affected?
They don't have the complex adaptive immunity like we do, no antibodies or T cells, but they do have innate defenses. And those, well, those could be compromised by mirror bacteria too.
So even though their immune systems are more basic, they're not necessarily safe?
Yep. The report goes into how mirror bacteria could mess with their innate immunity. They use the fruit fly as an example.
Fruit flies? Those little guys that are always hanging around bananas? What's so special about them?
They might seem small, but fruit flies are super important for research. Scientists know a ton about their genetics and immune systems.
Okay, so they're a good model for this. So how would mirror bacteria mess with their defenses?
Fruit flies and lots of insects, they rely on recognizing peptidoglycan. It's a part of bacterial cell walls. It's like a signal flare that tells their immune system, hey, there's bacteria here.
Right, but peptidoglycan, that's a chiral molecule, isn't it?
Exactly. And mirror bacteria, their peptidoglycan would be the wrong way around, so it wouldn't trigger those receptors. Their immune system's like, nothing to see here.
But bugs have other defenses, right? Couldn't they just eat the mirror bacteria?
They could try, but the report says there could be problems at each step. Like phagocytosis, that's when cells engulf stuff that often relies on recognizing specific shapes. Mirror bacteria could slip past that.
So it's like a disguise, basically.
Yeah, and even if they did get eaten, the enzymes that break down bacteria inside insect cells might not work on mirror molecules.
So it's a multi-layered problem. Mirror bacteria could get past multiple defenses. That's got to have big implications for insects, right?
Huge. The report's saying this could affect not just individual insects, but whole ecosystems.
Okay, let's talk about that. How could mirror bacteria mess up insect populations and the ecosystems they're part of?
Imagine a mirror bacteria that kills pollinators, bees, butterflies, plant reproduction goes down, the whole food chain's affected.
That's awful. Like a domino effect. One thing goes wrong, it all falls apart.
Exactly. They also talk about predator-prey relationships. What if a mirror bacteria only killed one kind of predatory insect? Its prey would explode in population. More chaos.
It's like a super delicate web, and mirror bacteria come along and just start snipping at the threads.
Great analogy. Shows how connected everything is and how messing with that can have crazy consequences.
We've talked about animals, big and small. What about plants? They don't have immune systems like us, right? How do they fight off bacteria?
It's true they don't have the same system, but they do have defenses. They can recognize pathogens, and they can fight back by making antimicrobial compounds or stroke thinning their cell walls.
So they're not just sitting ducks, but would those defenses work against mirror bacteria?
That's the big question. The report says mirror bacteria could potentially overcome them. A lot of plant defenses rely on recognizing specific chiral molecules, so mirror bacteria, with their reverse chirality, might just slip right past.
So it's that same problem again. The plant's defenses don't even see them as a threat.
Right, and they give examples. Some plants make antimicrobial peptides that target bacterial cell walls, but those peptides are often chiral, so they might not work on the mirror image cell walls.
Wrong key, wrong lock again.
Yep. And they even suggest that mirror bacteria could get past the physical barriers plants use to protect themselves.
Plants have physical barrier, what, like thorns?
Not quite. They have a cuticle, that's their outer layer, it's a barrier. And they have these things called stomata. They're like little openings for gas exchange. They can close up to keep pathogens out.
So plants do have defenses, but you're saying mirror bacteria could get around them.
It's possible. The report says they might find weaknesses in those barriers or even manipulate the plant to let them in.
Manipulate, like mind control.
Not exactly, but bacteria have been evolving for billions of years, right? Some have figured out how to hijack plant cells. Mirror bacteria could evolve those abilities too.
So they could get inside plants. What happens then?
The report says they could spread through the plant's vascular system. That's the network of vessels that carries water and nutrients.
Like hijacking the plant's circulatory system.
Right. And once they're in there, they have access to all sorts of nutrients, so they can grow and multiply like crazy.
This is sounding familiar. It's like how they could spread through the bloodstream in animals.
You're catching on. But with plants, there are some extra wrinkles.
Like what?
If they infect the phloem, that's the part that carries sugars, they could mess up the plant's energy distribution.
They could starve the plant, essentially.
It's possible. And for certain plants, that could be a disaster. Imagine a mirror bacteria infecting wheat or rice.
Oh no, that's global food supplies. We'd be talking famine.
That's the fear. And they say it's not just crops, wild plants too. Whole ecosystems could be disrupted.
This is really starting to feel like a global crisis waiting to happen. There has to be some way to protect plants, right? We have pesticides, fungicides, all those things we use to fight other threats.
That's the thing. The report talks about all those approaches, but there are big limitations. Pesticides, fungicides, they often target specific chiral molecules, so they might not work on mirror bacteria.
It's that same issue, trying to use the wrong tool for the job.
Yep. And biological control, like using predators or parasites, that's tough too. Mirror bacteria could be resistant to a lot of those things because their biology is so different.
So no easy answers. It's like our current tools are useless against them. This is getting more and more unsettling.
It really makes you think. And it shows we need new ways of thinking, new research into how to fight these things if they ever show up.
Okay, we've covered humans, animals, plants. What about the environment as a whole? Could these bacteria live and spread in different environments?
The report looks at that in depth. Soil, water, air, even cities and buildings.
Let's start with soil. It's full of microbes, right? How could mirror bacteria change things there?
They say mirror bacteria could do well in soil, especially if they're resistant to the things that normally keep bacteria in check, like predators and natural antibiotics.
So they could outcompete the bacteria that are already there, messing up the balance of the whole ecosystem?
That's a possibility. They also talk about nutrient cycles.
Nutrient cycles, what are those?
It's how important stuff like nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon moves through the environment. Soil bacteria are crucial for that. They break down stuff and release those nutrients back into the soil.
Right, so if mirror bacteria messed with that, it could affect plant growth, the whole food web.
Exactly. They say mirror bacteria could change the whole makeup in the soil microbial community, meaning we don't know how nutrients would be affected. The whole soil could change.
What about water? Could mirror bacteria survive in lakes, oceans, that kind of thing?
They look at that too, both freshwater and marine environments. Same concerns, food webs and nutrient cycles could be disrupted.
So soil and water are both at risk. Air. Could they travel through the air?
It's possible. Some bacteria make spores. They're super tough, can survive almost anything, including floating through the air.
So if mirror bacteria made spores, they could spread all over the place on the wind. That's not good.
Not good at all. And then there's us, humans, moving things around, trade, travel. We could be spreading them without even knowing it.
Like tiny little hitchhikers?
Right. And they even say mirror bacteria might be able to survive in buildings, hospitals, all those places.
They could be everywhere. It's a reminder that we share the planet with all these tiny life forms, and what we do affects them.
True. And it brings us back to that question, should we be doing this research at all?
Right, that's the ethical issue here. Is it worth the risk? What does the report say about that? So we've talked about all the scary stuff, the risks of mirror bacteria, but the report also mentions potential benefits, right? Like, is there anything good about this research?
Oh, definitely. The risks are real, but there's also a flip side, some potential benefits that are pretty exciting.
Okay, I gotta hear this. What could we learn from studying these weird mirror image life forms?
Well, think about it. Mirror bacteria, they could help us understand the most basic stuff about life itself.
You mean like how life works at the most fundamental level?
Exactly. By studying how mirror bacteria do their thing, we might learn about the rules of biology that apply to all life, from tiny bacteria to us.
So what kind of questions could we answer?
Like, why does life on Earth use left-handed molecules? Is it random chance, or is there some deeper reason?
That's a huge question. Makes you wonder if life on other planets, if it exists, would be the same, or if there could be mirror image life out there.
Exactly. Those are the kinds of mind-blowing questions we could tackle with mirror bacteria. It's pushing the boundaries of what we know about biology.
Okay, so that's the big picture, fundamental stuff. Any practical uses, like for medicine or technology?
The report mentions a few things, like making new drugs that our bodies can't break down as easily.
How would that work?
Remember, our enzymes are designed to break down left-handed molecules, so a mirror image drug, it might last longer in the body, be more effective.
It's like a code our body can't crack.
Perfect analogy. They also talk about using mirror bacteria in biotechnology, making new materials or enzymes that don't exist in nature.
Wow, it seems like we're just starting to understand what mirror bacteria could do. It's exciting, but also kind of terrifying. So, given all the risks, how do we do this research safely?
The report is really clear about this. We need to be super careful and transparent, really weigh the risks and benefits before doing anything more.
So it's a balancing act, potential good versus potential bad. And it's not just scientists who should be making that decision, right?
Absolutely not. The public needs to be part of the conversation, too.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. Mirror bacteria, they're fascinating and, yeah, a little bit scary. We've talked about how they could affect our immune systems, how they could mess up entire ecosystems.
It's like peeking into a whole different kind of life and realizing how much we still don't know.
I can't help but think, what if we're not alone in the universe? What if there are other planets with mirror image life? Would they be dangerous to us, or could we live together somehow?
Now that is a question that will keep people thinking for a long, long time.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We hope this got you thinking about mirror bacteria and all the possibilities, good and bad.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the mysteries of science.